So like I said last time, we started discussing the translation of dialect, and we explained several terms that are related to jargon, that are related to accents, and the difference between a dialect and an accent. And we also talked about the register. So can someone remind me of what we mean when we say a dialect? So what's a dialect? What's a dialect?
لهجة.
I don't want the translation. I want the definition.
It's how certain people speak in a certain place, in a particular place.
Okay, Mariam.
It's like a language used by a group of people which has like different words, phrases, like different from the native language or the original language.
Different from the native language is a little bit inaccurate because a dialect is native. It's like it can be native. Maybe the word you're looking for is standard, not native. Okay, good. So what is an accent then? What's an accent?
The way of speaking.
Explain. What do you mean when you say the way of speaking?
Can I? عالية.
Rima, نشوف Rima, she's raising her hand. Rima.
Different pronunciations of the same words.
Excellent. So basically the main difference between a dialect and an accent is that accents are mainly related to how we pronounce certain words and how the pronunciation differs from place to another. Now, a dialect can have that particular system of pronunciation, okay? So every person who has a dialect, now the dialect can have different words, different structures, but may share the same word but pronounced differently. So it may include accents as well. Okay, so what is register? What is register? What is register?
Yes, Sarah.
تفضلي سارة.
Register is how someone uses any languages differently in different circumstances.
Excellent. So register is more personal, which means it's how I speak to my mother, and how that way of speaking differs when I speak to my sister, and again, how that differs when I speak with my students, and so on. So register is about a person's way of speaking depending on your choice of words, your tone, your body language, and again, how that differs when you speak with a person and it differs when you speak to another person. Okay, what is jargon? What is jargon?
It is it's the language of a specific field.
Excellent. Can you give me an example, a general example?
صعيب.
Like legal English, like legal Arabic, like medical Arabic, like medical English. So it's the terminology that is used by certain people based on a certain field, or for having something that is in common, a science that is in common, or a certain job that is in common. So they use certain terminology that describes their work in that particular language. And to outsiders who are not specialized in that particular science or field or discipline, they find what they're saying somewhat awkward or may be incomprehensible. They may even not understand it. What is language prejudice or dialect prejudice? What is dialect prejudice? What is dialect prejudice? Raise your hand if you know. Mariam?
It's discrimination based on how someone speaks.
Excellent. Finally, what is untranslatability?
Ariyaj.
Okay,
It's when a text can't be translated or it doesn't have an equivalence.
good. Now we're going to start with this part and ask, is there anything in the world that is untranslatable?
No,
Except for?
Quran, Holy Quran.
Good. So what we have is not the translation of the Quran as much as we have the translation of the meaning of the Quran. And we said this is because this text is said by Allah, the Creator. So there would never be an equivalent translation to other languages that is made by humans, the creation. But anything else in the world can be translated, can be communicated in other languages. Okay. Now, all of the terms that we discussed, the jargon, the register, the dialects, why are they important to me as a translator? Well, because as we said, language is not something that is dead. It's not dead, it's alive. And by alive, we mean it has its own characteristics and it differs from one person to another. And based on these differences, my work as a translator should follow these changes. Sometimes these changes aren't important when the text is, I want to say, neutral or free of emotion, or when the only thing that matters in this text is its meaning. In that case, all texts are the same. And let me explain what that means. Now, I'm translating I'm translating a lesson. Someone is delivering a lecture in English, and the audience only speak Arabic. So my job is to interpret the lesson to the students. Now, in this case, what these students are interested in is the knowledge that this professor or this teacher is communicating. So whatever manner this person is using is not as much, it's not as important as the meaning. So the message here is more important than the style or the way the message is conveyed. And the reasons are plenty to explain here. We'll discuss them further when we discuss interpretation. Now, someone gives me, let's say, an official document, and I'm going to send this official document to the government. It's a marriage contract, for example. Now, here, this legal document is free of emotion. It doesn't matter the linguistic background of the writer, the the emotional status of the writer, the psychological status of the writer. All of these things don't matter when you translate a marriage document. But if you're translating a speech, for example, speech has emotions, and it depends on why this speech is being said. But generally speaking, anyone who delivers a speech tries to portray himself or herself in that particular speech to the audience. So, like how a person writes a speech differs from a different person. And that is the key to identifying whether my text is neutral or requires more work. If how do I test my text? Basically, you look at it and think of it. Is it neutral or not? And by neutral, I mean, does how it's been written affect the reader of this particular text or not? Is it important to stress the things that have been stressed in the source text? Did the person who write the source text intend for these particular linguistic characteristics to appear or not? Asking these questions facilitates our work as translators. Now, if I'm translating, for example, no, that's not, okay. Let's say I have a medical prescription, and on this prescription, the types of drugs that have been prescribed, the dose of each drug or medicine, the time that you should be the time when you should be taking these medications. Now these things, how they were written doesn't matter. اللي هي الروشتة تبعت الطبيب. روشتة الطبيب مش مهم، ما فيهاش مشاعر، ما فيهاش يعني سواء هذا الطبيب أو هداك الطبيب أو هداك الطبيب كتبها, it's going to be written the same way. You're just giving information. So if it is just information, your work as a translator is simple. You're going to convey that information in the target language. So that's the basic level of translation. It gets trickier. It gets, let's say, more difficult. It gets more difficult when it's no longer just a translation. And by saying it's no longer just a translation, it means that the person who wrote the source text had more intentions than to just give you information. So the text is no longer about the information only, it's about how this piece of information is being delivered inside the text. Now, the simple definition of translation is the production of a target text that gives the meaning of the source text. So this is basically what I just said. When I'm going to move to the second phase of translation, when emotion is present, when style is a factor, when how the text is written is different, is a key factor in the translation or in the text itself, or in how this text is going to be received by the audience that's going to read it. Now, the two main strategies, or let's say they're not strategies, the two main general terms under which several strategies exist to handle that kind of texts, the kind that is more than just a text, is what we call foreignization and domestication, or domestication. Foreignization comes from the word foreign. And what is the meaning of foreign? Ajnabi, right? Domestication is the opposite of foreignization. Domestication is related to, if you've ever come across the word domestic violence, what is domestic violence? What's domestic violence?
I think violence
العنف
inside
الأسري.
Excellent.
عنف
Excellent.
أسري.
So it's العنف الأسري. So here domestic is related to, let's say, someone's home, someone's original country, someone's original language. And like I said, these two general terms, within them, there are so many strategies that we can use to handle dialects, to handle jokes, to handle cultural differences, and so on and so forth. So let's explain what foreignization is and what domestication is. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a hint, and I'll see if some of you can get it without me introducing the definition first. Now, if I have a text about الحضارة الفرعونية, okay? So I have a text about الحضارة الفرعونية, and I'm going to translate this text. No, I'm just going to make it a simpler example. I'll give you a simpler example. You all know Ahmed Shawqi, right? He's from where? Like, where is he from? Where is Ahmed Shawqi from?
Egypt.
Egypt, good. So I have a text that describes Ahmed Shawqi's poetry or work or whatever. And it says, he was to me, let me get this. I'm going to put it in Arabic. كان بالنسبة لي كأحمد شوقي. Okay? Now I'm going to translate this. Now, as an Arabic audience, how would you understand this sentence? كان بالنسبة لي كأحمد شوقي. You would understand that he was a poet. To me, he's like, what is the main characteristic that everyone knows about Ahmed Shawqi is that he was a poet. So by describing someone as Ahmed Shawqi, I'm basically saying that he's a poet. Now, if I'm going to translate this to an American who's sitting in his apartment in New York, for example, and he reads the novel, and in the novel it says, he was to me like Ahmed Shawqi. Now, he's not going to get it. He's not going to understand it. So here I foreignized the text to him. It was foreign to him. The text, the meaning, the culture, everything was foreign to him. It was not easily understood. If I had written, he was to me like William Shakespeare, for example, or I might even do an Emily Dickinson or any other poet, male or female. In this way, I have domesticated the text. So what is the meaning of foreignization and what is the meaning of domestication? Please raise your hand if you have an answer. Again, if I wrote or if I translated it as he was to me like Ahmed Shawqi, and an American man who lives in an American state reads it, he would feel foreignized. He wouldn't understand the culture of the text. He wouldn't understand the dimensions of the text because he doesn't know who Ahmed Shawqi is. But if I write, he was to me like William Shakespeare or Emily Dickinson or any other poet that is familiar to the American culture or the English culture in general, this would be domesticating the translation or domesticating the text. So what could foreignization mean? What could domestication mean? Zainab.
I think foreignization is like when you use a known figure or a known symbol in the source language culture, while it's not well known or the other people in the target language don't know what does that mean. So it sounds foreign to them, they will not understand it.
Good.
When you are doing a domestication.
Thank you. Let's listen to someone else.
It's okay.
Basma.
Yes, I think domestication mean it translate the text by depending on the culture that I translated to.
Excellent, excellent, bravo. Okay, so let's read this together. Foreignization, you take the reader to the source language. Hold on. So foreignization takes the reader to the source language, which means I am the English speaker and I'm reading the text that says he was to me like Ahmed Shawqi. So this translation, this foreignization takes me as an English reader to the Arabic language and the Arabic culture. Domestication brings the source text to the target language. It brings the source text to the target language, which means I have Ahmed Shawqi has been taken from the Arabic text and has been moved to the English language into William Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, or any other American or English poet. Okay? It implies using terms and phenomena existing in the target language, and foreignization implies preserving the terms and phenomena of the translated language to deliver the meaning of the text. Okay? Basically, this is the same thing that we mentioned. Remember the example we gave last time about Shaw's Pygmalion, Eliza, and she was a poor florist in London with a marked Cockney accent and vocabulary. And we remember that her English didn't sound like the normal English we usually listen to or hear. So the characteristic here of Eliza having this language, having this like non-standard version of language is important to the plot because her teacher is a linguist who's trying to help her improve her language. So here, how she speaks is essential to the plot of the play. In a Brazilian translation, the translator chose to make her, so he changed it. If he had kept it the same way, it would have been foreignization. But what he did was that he made certain changes in the character to suit the culture of the target language. So he changed the locations' names. It wasn't London anymore. The accent wasn't English accent anymore. He changed everything to fit a lower class Brazilian. So in that text, in the source text, Eliza was a lower class British. Here she became a lower class Brazilian. Now you might ask a good question, which is, can I do that? Can I make a huge like modification to the text like this Brazilian translator? Do I have as a translator the liberty to do something like this؟ ايش بتستنى؟ في بنت ايش بتستنى؟ ما فيش مفعل انتظار، فيش انتظار في الغرفة. أنا شايلة زر الانتظار. يعني المفروض على طول تفوت. Okay. Now, how do I know if it's a line I can cross or not as a translator? Again, how do I decide as a translator if I have the liberty to make these changes or not? Now, before we begin that part, I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions. Do you have any questions? Because we have 5 minutes and the time remaining is like 5 minutes. So we're going to create a new room. But before that, if you have any questions, let me know. So any questions? Any questions? Any questions?